Marvin Mims is headed to the NFL. The Oklahoma Sooners are in the market for some offensive line help through the portal. And could the SEC consider further expansion? There's a really good argument to be made, and we'll discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation, and welcome to Locked On Sooners, a special Friday night edition, recording on a Friday night edition of Locked On Sooners. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Josh, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Obviously, now we can, really sort of, I think, put this off season into overdrive. Now that we've got the decision sort of everybody was waiting on, which was, the pair of decisions everybody's been waiting on. Dillon Gabriel, is he coming back? Ding, ding, ding. Marvin Mims, is he coming back? No, he's off to the National Football League. So now it's time to replenish, replace, and hopefully develop from within for Oklahoma. But obviously, the loss of Marvin Mims, everybody understands a huge one, just the amount of production that he's brought to the University of Oklahoma. 2020 season, 610 yards, 9 touchdowns there. 2021, 705 yards, 32 grabs, 5 touchdowns. And, of course, this season, very, very productive as well. So it's a substantial loss. It's an NFL talent for Oklahoma. Wish him the best. John, we've probably talked about Marvin Mims in my time on the show in terms of somebody's decision to go to the league more than anybody else in terms of just will they stay, will they go, is it right, is it wrong, could they benefit themselves by coming back? And ultimately, there was an outside chance, I think, that Marvin Mims could have benefited himself by coming back to Oklahoma. But I think most people agree that probably Marvin Mims, unless he just plummets on draft day or, between now and when he gets drafted, which I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to turn some heads at the combine, at pro day, all those sorts of things. So unless, he just kind of like absolutely plummets, I don't know that he was going to really enhance his stock a ton by coming back, unless he came back and, was the Biletnikoff Award winner or something. But just the physical traits, I don't know that he was positioned to necessarily help himself a bunch. So I think it's the right decision for him. And now the question, John, becomes, what does this mean for Oklahoma's wide receiver group? I think you got a good starting place with Jalil Farouk and then some of the other young names to talk about. Where are you at? Well, what does it mean for Marvin Mims? What does it mean for Oklahoma?
Just to provide a little bit of historical context as we kind of reflect back on Marvin Mims' career, you did a great job just outlining his first 2 seasons, but let's just look at it as a career. So only one player in Oklahoma Sooners history has more than 1,500 yards and averaged more yards per reception than Marvin Mims did in his career. Take a stab at who you think that might be, Josh.
I'm guessing CeeDee Lamb?
No.
Ryan Broyles?
No.
I don't know. I mean, those would be 2 of the top names that would come to mind.
Keith Jackson is the only player in Oklahoma history with more than 1,500 receiving yards in his career and averaged more yards per reception than Marvin Mims. He averaged 24 yards per reception. I mean, he was just a unicorn back in the mid 80s and in the triple or the wishbone offense. Marvin Mims averaged 19.5 yards per reception for his career. Again, just better than CeeDee Lamb, who averaged 19 yards per reception. Just better than Marquise Brown, who averaged 18.3 yards per reception. I mean, that's elite company. I talked the other day just about how maybe he didn't have like these elite traits that just stood out, and whether it was size or, jumping ability or speed or anything like that. The fact of the matter is the dude just knows how to win down the field. And when he gets behind defensive backs, it usually leads to good things. You don't average 19.5 yards per reception on, 123 catches over 3 seasons without being really good at winning down the field. And maybe that's just it. Maybe that's his elite ability, is just his ability to get down the field and win deep. Like that's it, it's kind of a rare thing to be able to do, especially if you don't have the speed to kind of just blow people away. I think of a guy, I know I always reference the Dallas Cowboys, but it's the team I watch the most closely in the NFL, Michael Gallup, another guy that doesn't necessarily have elite speed, but is constantly getting behind guys. He's constantly getting behind people in one-on-one coverage. Now, does it always lead to a completion? Not always, but I think that's why Marvin Mims was so good. Now, turning the page to what it means for the Oklahoma Sooners, I really feel like this means Jalil Farouk is going to be able to have a chance to take another step forward. We've seen how important he is to the Oklahoma Sooners offense, in that not only were they getting him involved in the passing game, but he was becoming an integral part of the run game as well. You look back at the Texas game, that was kind of really one of his better games of the year early on. Even though he didn't catch a lot of passes, he ran the ball really well in that game. And then it kind of sparked what was a pretty solid season for Jalil Farouk. I think he's probably the player that stands to benefit the most from Marvin Mims' departure, because a lot of those targets that went to Marvin Mims are going to have to go to somebody. Now, they don't necessarily go to the next guy, but he had a really solid season as kind of Oklahoma's number 2 wide receiver, 37 catches, 466 yards, 5 touchdowns. And he had 6 games with more than 5 receptions on the season, more than 4 receptions on the season. That's pretty solid. Now you take some of those, Mims targets, you redistribute them a little bit. Jalil Farouk's a guy that can win in a lot of different areas of the field. He's really good after the catch, like we saw in the Alamo Bowl a year ago, like we saw different times this season. Really good just with the ball in his hands. And as much as I rail against Jeff Lebby wanting to throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, Jalil Farouk is a guy that if you want to throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage and have your receiver do something with it when he gets it, he's a great player for that. Like, he's really good. He's not the same talent as Deebo Samuel, but I feel like he kind of fits that same type of player as Deebo Samuel, a guy that can do a lot of different things for you in your offense. And so I think he could have a really big 2023 season.
Well, he's obviously going to be one of the beneficiaries, no doubt about it, just given the production we've seen already and, where he's been on the depth chart, what this past season looked like for him. It's easy for Farouk to be that candidate. And frankly, he's going to have to be that type of breakout guy for Oklahoma. He's already been productive at OU, but now it's time for him to become a number 1 wide receiver, right? Which every wide receiver, John, wants to be the number 1 wide receiver. So I don't think you're in a situation here where Jalil Farouk is in any way, shape, or form shying away from this opportunity. I'm sure, look, he'd love for Mims to be back, right? You want to play with your brothers in arms as long as possible. But from the same end of the equation, he's probably kind of excited that Marvin Mims is moving on to a certain degree, because it does set the stage for him to be Oklahoma's big receiving star. Beyond that, obviously, good news recently with Drake Stoops deciding to go ahead and opt in for his next season, of that extra season of eligibility that he's got. We're still looking for now Jaden Gibson, Nick Anderson they're going to have to be light years better than what we saw as true freshmen, which you would expect that's going to be the case for them. I'm looking at both J.J. Hester and L.V. Bunkley Shelton's direction. We saw a little bit of L.V. Bunkley Shelton in the Cheez-It Bowl. We saw Oklahoma start to look his direction a little bit, so that would signal that maybe similar to what we saw a year ago, right, in the Valero Alamo Bowl with Jalil Farouk, to kind of sort of put the wheels in motion for what wound up being a very, very good 2022 for him. There were those early signs here with L.V. Bunkley Shelton that maybe that's kind of one of the next names in line, though there's going to be some serious competition in this signing class, though we didn't necessarily see it, again, from either a Gibson or an Anderson. I just think kind of based on what the recruiting profile says and just the sheer talent when you flip on the tape of both a Jaquaze Petaway and a Keon Brown, John, they're going to be heavily involved. One of those two guys, I swing and a miss, right? Swing and a miss this time a year ago felt the same way about Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson, but I just think that, to me, I'm going to be surprised if either Petaway or Keon Brown, by the time this thing's all said and done and we're having this show a year from now, that one of those two names we're not talking about. I'm not saying that they're going to be a 40 catch guy or, a 500-600 yard receiver or anything like that. But I think the chances that you saw Jaden Gibson get early for Oklahoma, hopefully we're talking about Petaway or Keon Brown next season getting those chances and delivering upon those chances. That's going to be pivotal for OU.
Yeah. I mean, Petaway in particular, he's a guy that brings something you don't really have. You've got some long speed guys like a Jaden Gibson, but do you have somebody that's got that kind of elite, quick, 0 to 100 kind of speed? Petaway might be able to be that deep threat for you now that Marvin Mims is heading out the door. But I think Jaden Gibson could potentially fill that role too. I mean, we saw that he's got the ability to break away from people after the catch when we saw him in the spring game. So it's going to be a really interesting competition. I mean, Oklahoma's still actually going after transfer portal wide receivers as well. So they're not necessarily resting on their laurels. And speaking of the transfer portal, I mean, the offensive line stuff is continuing to be very interesting for Oklahoma. When we talked about the addition of Caleb Schaefer on our show earlier this week, and we'll talk about a couple more offensive linemen that Oklahoma is targeting, and which might mean more for the Sooners. But first, let me talk to you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. Easy to eat, 100% covered in chocolate. It tastes great, and it's great for you. Anywhere from 17 to 19 grams of protein, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar. I mean, what more could you ask for in a protein bar? You look at a lot of the protein bars you might see on the shelves at the gas station, and man, they're just chock full of sugar. Well, Built Bar, that's not the case. And they got so many great flavors that if you aren't sure which one you want to try, they got a great mixed box that lets you try them all, and you can figure out which ones you like the best. My favorite is the peanut butter brownie. Also love that coconut almond. Just kind of reminds me of an almond joy. Again, the best tasting protein bar I've ever had. Tastes just like a candy bar, and it's great for you. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15. You can get 15% off your next order over at built.com. And again, thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. And hey, go check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast as well, hosted by our Locked On College Basketball experts. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. So go check out that show as well. It's basketball season. March Madness is just 2 months away. So tournament time is coming. All right, Josh, Walter Rouse versus Matthew Lee. They hosted both these guys, or has Rouse been on campus yet? I hadn't seen that yet, but Lee definitely was on campus. The center from UCF came to visit the Oklahoma Sooners, which is very intriguing. He's a guy that graded out very well, according to Pro Football Focus, the third best center in college football, according to Pro Football Focus. You posed the question as we were kind of getting ready for the show, which would be more important? Now, Walter Rouse, left tackle from Stanford, played a ton for the Cardinal. Matthew Lee, center from UCF, also played a ton for the Knights. So, Josh, take it away. Which one do you think would be most important for the Oklahoma Sooners to land in this recruitment?
Okay, so I think it's very important that Oklahoma just lands both, right? You got an opportunity to land both. But if you're making me do the pardon the interruption discussion here, right? Then I think it's got to be Walter Rouse for me. You had the injury to Sexton. It hasn't been officially revealed, John, or shared, but just kind of judging by maybe some afternoon comments that one Teddy Lehman said on The Rush with Tyler McComas, I'm sort of reading the tea leaves that it's a more severe knee injury than anybody would like. So that alone hurts your tackle depth a little bit going into next season. So for that reason, and just the fact that you're replacing both your left and right tackle, your two starters from this season, I think the more important of the two is Walter Rouse over Matthew Lee. But let me go ahead and just tell you that Matt Lee's played a lot of football at UCF, has been the starting center there for a long time, for multiple seasons, and was an all AAC player. So I think it's, if you can land both of these guys, Bill Bedenbaugh, we keep talking about it, man. He has made a killing here of late out of the transfer portal, and it'd be great to land both of these.
And it's really intriguing too, because this is a guy that's played with Dylan Gabriel. So not only do you get someone who's played a lot of football, but he's played a lot of football with your quarterback, which is kind of an intriguing proposition. The thing that I wonder though is, what does it mean for Andrew Rain? And I've seen kind of some scuttlebutt that maybe you kick him out to guard a little bit, but you just signed a guard to potentially, take over at left or right guard with Chris Murray going out. So is his injury something that's going to be potentially lingering that keeps him out for, a portion of the 2023 season? And that's why you're having to really address the center position like you're trying to address the tackle position. That's intriguing to me. I don't think we have a firm timeline. I think the last thing I saw from Andrew Rain was that he felt like he was going to be ready by spring. And is this just one of those situations where it's like, hey, Brent Venables is just saying, nobody's safe. If you thought you had a starting job just because you were an incumbent player, you're not safe. You still got to earn it. And if we have an opportunity to add talent at a certain position, we're going to do it. If it makes the person that we've got better, great. If not, then this person could take the job. I don't, it's going to be intriguing. I don't know if that's his thought process or not. It just kind of feels like they're not resting on anything. They're not assuming anything about anybody at this point in time.
Well, and just breaking down the center position a little bit, I actually backtrack just a smidge in terms of the depth charts. Instead of Florida State, I went back to Texas Tech just to see kind of what the lay of the land was for that game. So still, obviously, even though Rain didn't play versus Texas Tech, did he? Wasn't he hurt before that? So at any rate, he was still listed atop the depth chart. Conjul was second on the depth chart, and then Nate Anderson right there, third on the depth chart. Conjul, of course, we know, boom, has moved on. Andrew Rain, you mentioned the injury situation. So just from that alone, probably has you saying, okay, let's bring another center into the equation if we can do so, right? You went and you added Schaefer. I think, with Mathieu, what we saw, that's obviously been positive. Bird really was impressive in the bowl game. I think, versus Florida State, Bird in the Cheez-It Bowl really impressed some people. So you probably feel maybe a little bit better right now at guard than I think you do maybe center going into next season, though. Joshua Bates, we know about our man Joshua Bates, and he's got a chance, some people think, to step in and be a difference maker right away. But this at least, again, gives you that kind of like early insurance plan for both Rain and the fact that Conjul obviously is moving on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Joshua Bates and Norman. I'm not creating any kind of expectation to see true freshmen next year. I was let down. I was disappointed, man. I was expecting to see, more Robert Spears Jennings, more Jaron Canick, more Gentry Williams, more, Kobe McKenzie, with the lack of depth we had at linebacker. I was hoping to see just more true freshmen. And, we talked about Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, more of them. We saw Gavin Freeman. Like, we got to see him quite a bit. We got to see, Jaron Canick a little bit. Got to see our Mason Thomas a lot. But yeah, so going into next year, I'm not really putting any kind of expectations on true freshmen to play, because I just don't feel like the coaching staff really wants to put true freshmen out there unless they're like head and shoulders better than everybody else on the depth chart. It is just clear and obvious that they've got the playbook down. They know their responsibilities. They're taking care of all their business, and they're just immediately better than everybody else. Like, to me, if all things are equal, they're going with the guy that's played and's got experience at the college football level versus a true freshman. That's just kind of where I stand on it. But I do think it's an intriguing proposition to potentially add Walter Rouse and Matthew Lee and Caleb Schaefer. Again, we talk about all the time building depth, building competition, and that's something that Oklahoma lacked this year. Is they just didn't seem to have enough depth across the board. And you know what? Bringing in 40 new guys and losing as many guys as you'd lost, I mean, that'll do it for you. TJ Eckerd, I believe, from Tulsa. I can't remember the exact. Is he from News 9 in Tulsa?
I can have the answer for you quickly. I should know. He comes on the station a bunch.
Yeah, sorry, TJ, I'm blowing it here. But he had a really great observation that Oklahoma was losing a ton off of their offense, and we saw the impact that losing a ton off their defense did from 2021 to 2022. So losing Marvin Mims, Eric Gray, Anton Harrison, Wanye Morris, Chris Murray, Theo Weiss, Braden Willis. I think that touches everybody, but losing that much production and talent off your offense from 2022 to 2023, I think attacking the transfer portal to try and find veteran replacements for these guys, I think that's a smart move. It was a little bit up and down from 21 to 22 in the transfer portal class. You got good production on the defensive side from a few guys, but hopefully your additions if you're able to land Rouse, if you're able to land Lee, add them to Caleb Schaefer, add them to bringing back Austin Stogner. I think it probably provides you a little bit better security almost on offense. And then you hope that your young talent around it kind of steps up their games as you fill in with these veteran transfer additions.
You said something that was kind of interesting. I totally agree with you. I think it was made pretty clear that Brent Venables and this staff, well, ultimately the buck stops with Brent, right? It's his decision. But it feels like Brent and the entirety of the staff didn't philosophically just feel comfortable. Just, hey, let's throw this freshman, let's throw that freshman out there. If things go poorly again early for Oklahoma next season, it'll be curious to see if and let's hope we don't have to, find this fork in the road. But it'll be interesting to see if OU adopts that similar approach or if they pivot a little bit with the way that I agree with you that they didn't play at times a bunch of young guys this season, right? That to me will be fascinating to follow because you could make the argument either way that, okay, well, now finally they're making the right decision in playing these young players because guess what? This season's a lost cause, et cetera, et cetera. Or that could kind of mean that you're hitting the panic button, right, a little bit, that you're sort of abandoning the approach that philosophically you believe in. At any rate, it'd be nice. I still stand by the idea that it'd be huge for Oklahoma if this recruiting class, this signing class is such a, hit, ding, 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 that a couple of these guys, kind of like you said, John, they're just too good to leave on the sideline, right? That it sort of takes that decision-making process a little bit out of your hands. By the way, our man TJ Eckert, KTUL, KTUL, News Channel A.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. And I failed to mention Javante Barnes as well. Obviously, he played a ton. Some of it was injury related due to Marcus Majors' lower body issue. We don't know exactly what his lower leg injury. Sorry, that was a very hockey style injury reference there. Lower body injury. So we did get to see a lot of Javante Barnes, but yeah, aside from that, it just seemed like, and I wrote an article about this over at Sooners Wire about the linebacker depth in particular. Like you had 3 linebackers finish in the top 10 in snaps played in the country. Only one other team had more than one linebacker play more than 900 snaps last year, and that was Toledo. No other team in the football subdivision had 2 linebackers play more than 900 snaps, and Oklahoma had 3 of them. So that would have been a place where I would like to see them play some more linebackers because we saw in close games, things didn't work out well for them defensively down the stretch. So that's another conversation for another time. But as we move forward, you read a really interesting article. I'll let you set this up, Josh, because you threw this at me and I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah, well, that's kind of was my reaction to it as well, John. I don't see this as being altogether realistic anytime soon. I kind of feel like the wheels of realignment are grinding to a halt, at least for this next little bit here. But this was from All Hogs, which is I believe the SI affiliate of Arkansas, if I have that correctly. Here was just, I'll read a little bit verbatim of what the story said. Now that Texas and Oklahoma are headed to the SEC potentially as early as 2024, the question everyone, John, should be asking is simple. Who's next? The most logical answer is staring the league right in the face, quite literally. TCU. The Horned Frogs give the SEC a firm foothold in the Dallas market and would lock down all 4 of the major TV markets in Texas for good. They continue to make some arguments for why it makes sense right now. The most obvious of which is strike while the iron's hot, right? Playing in a national championship game. Basketball with Coach Jamie Dixon is on an obvious uptick. So from that standpoint, yeah, it would make sense to go get TCU right now. I would say to all Hogs, with all love, peace and love, with all peace and love and due respect, I don't think you're adding much of the Dallas market with TCU. You've got the Dallas market with Oklahoma and with Texas. And honestly, with Texas A&M, I think you've got the Dallas market. I think those are the three preeminent forces in the Dallas market. But, in theory, it sounds great. And maybe TCU is this program that's truly on the come up, John. And if they win a national championship, things can change dramatically for that program, which I guess we can segue into that portion of the national championship conversation, because I don't know that you and I will have the chance to tape talking about the national championship. Well, first, what do you think the expansion TCU, where are you at with this from all Hogs?
I mean, I think it's interesting, but it doesn't seem to make as much sense as some other schools might. You just look at like stadium capacity, university profile. It just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't move the needle as much as some others might. A prominent school and a prominent media market, sure. But like you mentioned, you've got the media market already, because growing up in Dallas-Fort Worth myself, as somebody who was just kind of a Big 12 fan before I really became an Oklahoma Sooners fan, it didn't matter that, what was on Saturday. If Texas was on, if Oklahoma was on, or if they were playing, generally one of those two teams was going to be on in DFW. You ride around Dallas-Fort Worth and you see Longhorn stickers and Sooners stickers and Aggies and, Texas Tech. Like Texas Tech honestly could make as much sense as TCU for that matter, because there's a ton of Red Raiders alumni in the Dallas-Fort Worth media market. But yeah, I like the idea. It's intriguing. I mean, I'm pro expansion. I love the idea of expansion. I wish the Big 12 would have done it years ago, but hey, thanks a lot, Bob Bowlesby. So I don't really see it. I just don't feel like maybe they'd be as much of a fit as, say, like an Oklahoma State, or some other teams out there. Like, look into the ACC for a Florida State or a Miami. I feel like they would try to aim higher first if they were going to expand further. But I'm with you. I feel like things are probably going to slow down for a bit. Let the new college football playoff thing get settled in. The expansion on that, let Oklahoma and Texas get into the SEC, kind of figure out where you're at. That doesn't mean that by 2030, we're not seeing expansion again. But I just think that everybody's going to kind of take a beat and just see where the landscape lies. Because I think that would be like the SECs, I feel like would be more apt to want to move into Florida more so than they already are. Because they've already got, you mentioned, the two major Texas schools, Oklahoma just right outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth media market. But you've only got one of the preeminent Florida programs. So would you want to go and get another one?
To me, if you're expanding with just assuming Notre Dame's off the table, okay? If you could get Notre Dame, that's the number one school you should try to go get. Assuming that's not a possibility, which it doesn't seem like that's a possibility for anybody. If you're only adding two, I would say both Clemson and North Carolina are very, very intriguing adds to me because of how good Clemson has been lately. The market that they would bring you would be a new market. Same for North Carolina. I would actually entertain an argument for Duke, just for similar reasons to North Carolina. You add basketball, you fortify basketball. I know that's not the biggest money driver, but when you start getting to 17, 18, 19, 20 teams that you're talking about adding, why not fortify basketball a little bit more and hypothetically get Kentucky, another dance partner in terms of blue blood status? So that would be where I would be looking at with it. North Carolina, I think, would be a better ad than Duke, just because guess what? They're better at football, and they've been better at football. I think, and this is a lot of people are going to disagree with this, I think Kansas would be an intriguing ad for the SEC for all of those same reasons. You talk about, like, if you want to say, hey, you want to lock down the Dallas market, okay, well, you don't really have the whole Kansas City market locked down, because Kansas is a huge presence in the Kansas City market and what they add for basketball. But hey, that's realignment discussion. That's great for a summer day.
So turning our attention to the national championship game, how are you feeling? And you may talk more about this when you're recording Sunday night. You want to tell them who you're going to have on Sunday night? I'm going to be away with my wife. We're just having time together. So Josh is going to take the lead and hold down the fort. But Josh, how are you feeling about the national championship game?
Well, first off, friendly tease for Sunday night. It will be the Plank Show meets Locked On Sooners. Chris Plank will join the podcast here, so we'll kick it around. We're going to talk Dylan Gabriel returning, Marvin Mims obviously electing to go to the NFL draft. We'll get some of Plank's thoughts on that. We're going to talk some softball, and we'll probably talk some national championship as well. Man, I'm leaning pretty heavily Georgia in this national championship game. I don't know that. I mean, I could make arguments for both ways. If I'm spinning this to an Oklahoma standpoint, what's best for OU, I can make, I think, a pretty fair argument either way that it's better for Oklahoma that Georgia repeats as national champion, because guess what? They just won the national championship. They've already been recruiting like crazy. And oh, by the way, they're not in Texas, right? So TCU, I can pretty easily understand where somebody would say, well, why do you want TCU winning a national championship? It's right there. Again, all of these things, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, but you do go after some of the same players in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area from a recruiting standpoint. And all of a sudden, you get that championship belt if you're TCU, and you start talking about, okay, maybe they start operating in a different tax bracket. I don't know if they have staying power or not. I would probably lean more toward, I don't know that if they win a national championship, we're going to be talking about TCU, rattling off multiple national championships with Sonny Dykes. Ask me to pick it, I would say, no, I don't think that's going to happen. But you win a national championship, things can change pretty quickly, John. So I guess from the OU perspective, I'm probably rooting for Georgia, but I also just think Georgia's going to win this game, John, because I think they're a better football team.
Yeah, the Fort Worthian in me really would like TCU to win this one, because I've got friends that are Horned Frogs. Our buddy Steven Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs. I mean, how ecstatic would he be? Just a good dude. I don't really know the Georgia guys. I'm sure they're great dudes too, but I've spent a lot of time chatting with Steven Simcox on college football, on family life, all kinds of stuff. And so, how cool would it be? Like a dude that I worked with in Ethiopia, him and his wife, they're Horned Frogs alumni. I know that they're going to be staying up middle of the night. They'll be up like 3:00 in the morning watching that game. I really would like, I've been there. I've watched Dallas Cowboys games. I've watched Sooners games, at 3 a.m. hoping that my team's going to win. And there's nothing worse than you're being up that late, getting that little sleep, and your team losing. So I'm kind of pulling for them on that front too. Shout out to you all out there in Ethiopia. Hope everything's good. But yeah, so my Fort Worthian, I lived in, just north of Fort Worth for, I don't know, 12 years or so. I almost went to TCU. I just didn't want to write the essay they had on their application. So yeah, it's that kind of has me leaning how I'd like it to go is TCU. From your standpoint on the recruiting front, I think it hurts Texas and Texas A&M more if TCU wins the national championship than it hurts Oklahoma. Oklahoma's proven that they are a diverse recruiter. They'll go to Texas, sure, but they'll spend as much time in the Southeast. They'll pull kids out of Washington. They'll get a kid out of California. They'll go to Colorado. They'll go to Kansas. It doesn't matter where they're from. If you're good, they'll go to New Jersey and New York. It doesn't matter. If you're good, Oklahoma's coming after you. If they think that you're a good player, Oklahoma's going to come for you. So, but on the Texas front, Texas, I mean, the Texas fans are really happy to tell us how many Texas kids they get on their roster all the time. If TCU ends up being really, really good and they're able to sustain this for several years, that's going to hurt Texas eventually. They'll have more competition. Sonny Dykes has proven he can recruit at several stops now. And he's proven that he can win at several stops now. And if they cap this off with a national title, that's only going to benefit TCU. It's going to hurt Texas, which we're always down for hurting Texas. But how I'm leaning into this one, Georgia. I really think it's going to be the Bulldogs. Just the experience that they have in this game. The defense gave up a ton of points to the Ohio State Buckeyes, but again, it's still a really good defense. Stetson Bennett has proven to be a really good college quarterback after some questions coming into last year. It's just a really good Georgia offense, a really good Georgia defense. That said, TCU's offense is good enough to keep it competitive, and then you don't know what's going to happen. I do think, that Georgia isn't going to be able to cover. TCU covers the spread in a tight ball game, but I do think that Georgia ultimately pulls it out and goes back to back and continues that undefeated streak. It's such a crazy run that Kirby Smart's been on over the last couple of years. So who knows when it'll end, because they'll have quite a few games early on next year where they'll have a chance to continue that winning streak. Any other thoughts you want to leave the people with, Josh, for their weekend of sports watching?
I think I might be bouncing around a little bit. Hopefully I'm back now, but my heart of hearts is rooting for TCU. I can't separate myself from that. I'm definitely pulling for the dog in this game. Not the bulldog, the underdog in this game, which is clearly TCU. So, whether or not it's good or bad for Oklahoma, I don't know. I think you laid out some good reasons that it's probably more harmful to Texas and Texas A&M. And, the other teams that it would be potentially not so great for is whatever's left over of this Big 12 conference, right? I mean, I think it positions TCU, if they win a national championship, man, to clean up and to be the clear number one program in the Big 12 moving forward. So that's like, we can talk about Oklahoma all night long into the weekend and, the following year, but it's the other Big 12 programs that should be rooting for Georgia. And it's funny because I see a lot of those folks on social media pretty happy for TCU waving that Big 12 flag. And I don't know that it's necessarily great for you, but hey, I'm definitely rooting for TCU. It's hard not to in this game. We just saw Georgia win a national championship, and ultimately it's good for college football, right? To see somebody different win it. And I think, that parity would be fun to see.
And this continues to further support my college football playoff expansion argument, because what did everybody say? Big 12 would have no chance. Now we'll see what happens, like when they get into the title game, but nobody really gave TCU a chance except for our guy, Shayan Jayaraja over at CBS Sports. Very few people gave TCU a chance to beat Michigan, and they did it. Very few people are giving TCU a chance to beat Georgia. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think that they're a tough team. They're a physical team. They've got the heart to keep it close and not like lay down in this one. So it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I'm really looking forward to tuning into this one. It's going to be fascinating. We're not here, going Big 12. I have other reasons why I'm kind of pulling for TCU, but we're also not going SEC because none of that. It's Oklahoma or nothing, but go Frogs. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all platforms and on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button over there. Smash that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop, and hit the like button. Give us a 5-star rating over on Apple to help other people find out about the show. We had a great year in 2022. We hadn't really talked about that. Don't like to toot my own horn, but thank you so much for being part of the show and making Locked On Sooners your first listen and helping other people find out about the show. We're really loving the interaction we're getting from you on YouTube and on Twitter as well. So if you haven't followed the show over on Twitter, make sure you do that at Locked On Sooners. But again, he's Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef, and here on Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. I'm John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can also read my work covering the Sooners over at thesoonerswire.com. But until Sunday night, Monday morning, where you get the Plank Show crossing over with Locked On Sooners, Josh Helmer and Chris Plank. I'll catch you on Tuesday or Monday. We'll be back for the live show on Monday night. So we'll be back then. Until then, Boomer Sooner.